Is the Ice Wizard as bad as people say? I guess even the Ice Spirit would fit more as a legendary than him. Best goddamn card in the game. I love him like my own child. I love him like my brother.
Oh my God!
From his first day in Clash Royale until now, people have had a lot to say about the Ice Wizard. But is he really as weak as they claim? Or is he secretly one of the game's best? Today we're diving into the coolest journey Clash Royale has ever seen. Yeah, it's gonna be one of those videos. And by the end, you'll see why Ice Wizard might just be the most underrated card in the game. Ice Wizard's story begins from 2016, the year Clash Royale was still a newborn game. First released and globally launched on March 2nd. As you already know, there were no crazy cards, no crazy abilities or evolutions, no clan wars, and nothing! Not even legendaries. To make the game more fun and diverse, Supercell was planning to add more cards, of course. They were only common, rare, and epic rarities at that time. But devs started thinking and had a cool thought. Hey, how about we add a new rarity to our game and make it so cool and awesome? But also really rare and expensive at the same time, so only the 3% of our player base has it while the others are only dreaming about it.
Well, gosh, Jim, that's a great idea.
I don't know why Goofy would be working at Supercell, but hey, that's how the legendary rarity was created. Before the game's global launch, we got a sneak peek at the new cards that would be added soon. These included the Royal Giant, Dark Prince, Poison Spell, 3 Musketeers, and 2 mysterious legendary cards. These new cards were officially released on February 29th, and among them were the 2 legendary cards, the Princess and everyone's favorite Finnish uncle, one of the creators of the Void spell, the Ice Wizard. With his epic dance moves, stylish hair, and a handlebar mustache that's basically a horseshoe, he quickly became one of the coolest characters ever introduced in Clash Royale. And I mean that in both meanings of the word. Not only was he released in Clash Royale, but he also made an appearance as a limited-time character in Clash of Clans during the Clashmas update on the same date. Oh, and he's also featured in Supercell's relatively new game, Squad Busters. Oh, and if you're ever wondering what his Finnish voice lines mean, here are some of the translations.
Lunta!
Which translates to snow,
Yeah!
means ice,
Pakasta!
means freeze,
Kylmä!
means cold,
Täältä pesee!
which means take this! The Ice Wizard is so cool that his mustache is literally too hot for TV, despite his icy demeanor. Who knew TVs even existed in the Clash Royale universe? But let's take a closer look at what this Finnish legend brings to the table. The Ice Wizard is a 3 elixir card that slows down enemy troops' movement speed by 35% after each attack. Like his fiery brother, the Wizard, he also deals area of effect damage, or AoE, though not as much. In fact, the Ice Wizard's stats were fairly weak. He dealt 60 damage per hit and had relatively low HP. However, his health was enough to survive a few hits and a fireball. Even with rage, he didn't do much damage, and that's pretty much all he had going for him. At first glance, anyway. While his stats might seem weak, remember that his real power lies in the slowdown effect, which was a game-changing mechanic at the time. For example, a giant could normally destroy your Princess Tower and also deal massive damage to the King Tower before dying, but with the Ice Wizard's slowdown, the giant could only land 4 punches, significantly reducing the damage dealt. And since the Ice Wizard is also a splash damage card, he was great for countering swarms like skeletons and goblins. Well, kinda. He couldn't one-shot them, but hey, that's okay. His true value came from his slowdown ability, and before you start saying that he was the weakest card, keep in mind that his purpose was always to defend and support. Ice Wizard was never meant to be an offensive card. For just 3 elixir, he became one of the best defensive support cards in the entire game, offering immense value in almost any deck. He was always meant to be played with other cards and or with the Princess Tower to slow down the enemy push, which is a massive game changer. And because he was a legendary, he was extremely hard to obtain in 2016, like the rarest ever. So back then, there were super magical chests, which had chances of dropping a legendary, but that wasn't even guaranteed. We've already talked about this on our channel, which you can check out later. There's probably a card somewhere in the corner. But because he was so rare, not everyone had him. In fact, according to ClashRoyalepedia.com's 2016 stats, only about 3.2% of the entire player base had him, which is really unbelievably low, but hey, that's the truth. Legendaries were just difficult to get back in 2016. unlike today where you're able to get them like candy. Just to prove myself right, for an example, on the day of writing this, I decided to play a little bit before continuing to work, and I got a lucky drop. And guess what I got from a 3-star lucky drop? 3 damn cards of Mega Knight. Like, seriously, holy duck. That is the luckiest drop I have ever gotten from a 3-star lucky drop. This shouldn't be possible, but here it is. In 2016, that would be unbelievable. But we already had our own version of a lucky drop, the free wooden chest. If you were lucky enough, you were able to get a legendary for free, randomly, if you were lucky. Sweet, sweet memories. Back to our Finnish uncle, players started to come up with strategies and decks that would work well with the Ice Wizard, and there were plenty of good ones created. For example, Ice Wizard made an appearance in the Golem beatdown decks, usually with his brother Fire Wizard. The Golem would absorb all the enemy damage while Ice Wizard slowed them down, giving you a chance to push even harder and dominate the princess on that tower. Man, I gotta watch my wording. Anyway, another deck where the Ice Wizard made an appearance was with the P.E.K.K.A. The P.E.K.K.A. served as both a strong win condition and a tank, while the Ice Wizard either stayed in the back to defend or followed the P.E.K.K.A. to support the push. In either case, the enemy was forced to react to the P.E.K.K.A. with all their elixir, and while they were spending everything they had to stop that push, you could sneak a little prince down the opposite lane and score a tower. At the start of March, usage rates for the top ladder peaked at an impressive 30% before settling at a steady 20%. In the following months, the Mortar Bait deck was created, and many players quickly took a liking to it. Additionally, the popular Expo decks emerged, which we'll discuss in more detail shortly. But before we continue, you mind scrolling down just a little bit and tapping that red subscribe button? It's free, you know, and it really helps us out. It takes a lot of time to research, write, edit these videos, so dropping a free like and subscribing is greatly appreciated. While you're down there, you can also join my YouTube membership to unlock some cool perks and join my Discord server for free. Thanks. And now, let's get back to the video. In April, the Royal Giant received a massive buff, and as a result, the Ice Wizard, along with some other cards, saw some increased usage. The Ice Wizard wasn't just useful on defense, he also made a solid push when paired with the Royal Giant. By the end of April, the Ice Wizard's usage rate remained solid at 24% in the top 100 ladder plays. The community had mixed opinions on this card. Some players considered it weak and useless due to its stats, while others thought it was overpowered and unfair. However, many players absolutely loved it. Some even preferred the Ice Wizard over the Princess, who was one of the best legendary cards at the time. You could argue that the Ice Wizard overshadowed the archers as well, simply because he was just more effective at doing the same job. And honestly, just look at his design. He is the definition of cool. The level of detail and the icicles on his face, especially his facial hair, just... From his deployment animation to the way he shoots, he exudes coolness in every aspect. The animation Supercell released a few years later is probably one of the best in the game, even though it's not fully accurate to his actual in-game stats. Supercell is a master at designing a character and showing it off. For months, the Ice Wizard remained the go-to defensive card, with his usage rate climbing to 30% and even peaking at 40% at one point. That's pretty incredible for a defensive card. He was just so versatile. He fit into so many decks, he was easy to cycle, and provided unmatched defensive value for just 3 elixir. On top of all of that, he was resistant to Fireball, making him the best choice for many players. But when a card gets overused and remains powerful, you can bet that Nerf Hammer is coming strong. But at the same time, Minion Horde was still popular, and while the Ice Wizard could defend against it alone, he wasn't the best option. The Mega Minion also started to rise in popularity, further diminishing the Ice Wizard's effectiveness. His usage rates were going up and down from 17% to sometimes 9%, but it was a fact that he was still getting overused, especially in mid-ladder. Some players said that in mid-ladder they saw Ice Wizard in 50 to 60% of the decks they played against, which by that point, I can understand him being a little annoying to deal with. So on August 24th, during the balance changes, the Ice Wizard's HP was reduced by 5%. While that might not seem like a significant change, it was enough that P.E.K.K.A. could now one-shot him and he became vulnerable to 3 wizard shots. Alongside the Ice Wizard nerf, P.E.K.K.A., Golem, and both princes were buffed, which didn't help the Ice Wizard's situation. By the end of August, his usage rate dropped to 17%, a small dip, but still a solid number. The meta kept changing and Ice Wizard couldn't really find a place to get overused again, mainly because of of the guards and Mega Minion, Ice Golem was skyrocketing in popularity as well, basically replacing the Ice Wizard. His usage was dropping by a lot, which kinda did make him balanced, but in October, the guards saw a big decline in usage, and Ice Wizard managed to go up again. He got comboed with Ice Spirits, and as an alternative, Fire Spirits with a usage of 18%. But soon after, the Ice Wizard started falling back down again. The top used cards at that time were as follows. The Mega Minion was on top, Golem 2 was at a pretty high usage rate, which Ice Wizard kinda sucks against defending alone. His November usage rates were recorded at 2%, eventually turning into 0% for December. And with that, that covers all of the changes to the Ice Wizard for 2016. I mean, there was also one small change, not balance-wise, but a bug fix in May, where they fixed the card's range from a bugged 6 tiles to 5.5. This change is very small, so I didn't want to include it, but, you know, hey, that's what we do on this channel, so here you go. His downfall wasn't caused by the August nerf, but the game meta that was circulating around that time. While he was a great defensive card, unfortunately some players just couldn't find a great deck that worked well in the meta and also included the Ice Wizard. So our cool Finnish uncle sadly lost significance for the end of 2016 and also the start of 2017. And that wasn't the last of it. 2017 would be one of the best years for the Ice Wizard, and, well, you'll see why shortly. By the way, super quick note, the usage rate screenshots you'll see next are from the top 200 ladder plays, so if you notice a 10% rate in the image, but I mention a 5%, now you know why. The top 100 ladder plays are generally easier to track and understand. At the start of the year, January, February, March, April, it was at 0% usage rate, sometimes 6% if he was lucky inside the meta. Players were even surprised to see him getting used, so the Ice Wizard was in a really bad spot. He just didn't fit in well with the current meta because it was being replaced by Mega Minion, Archers, and Ice Golem. In decks, it was just missing out being a 9th or 10th pick for most users. But did you know that Supercell was planning to make a new card with the Ice Wizard? You may not have heard of it, but the Ice Wizard Tower was a new card Supercell wanted to add to the game. We know about this because of an accidental leak from one of the Clash Royale content creators, Molt and Nick. This got so many players intrigued, but soon enough, the idea was scrapped. Not because everyone found out about it, but because the tower would be a huge problem for everyone. And as you could imagine, that would have caused a big problem, and would be the exact opposite of what Supercell intended.
Wait, can we use the new Legendary Ice Wizard Tower, or I'll cut this part out? When does that come out?
No, we'll just play with that after this.
What? It's actually similar to the reason why the devs decided against adding the heal spell to the game. Because of all of these factors, we don't have the Ice Wizard Tower in Clash Royale. So, back to our Clash Royale Ice Wizard. Supercell saw how bad of a situation the Ice Wizard was in. They didn't want their second legendary card getting used by ghost people, so they changed him up a little bit again. In the balance changes rolled out on August 10th, the Ice Wizard's damage was buffed by 10%, and to balance that out, they reduced his hit speed by 0.2 seconds, so from 1.5 to 1.7. Now, what did this 10% damage buff do? Well, a lot of things. For starters, Ice Wizard was now able to one-shot skeletons and bats, which was a massive interaction change. He also now killed minions and archers with one less shot. Also a massive improvement to his defensive capabilities. However, his usage rates after the buff are rather interesting.
Especially keeping an eye out for my favorite card, the Ice Wizard. Ice Wizard got that buff. I like the buff, but his usage rates have been kind of funky. Right when he got the buff, he saw a big spike in usage rates, and then it kind of went down again. Not to where it was before the buff, but it went down quite a bit. What that tells me is that people probably tried to use him after the buff, and they just found to themselves, hey, I'd rather have Archers or Musketeer or E-Wiz, right? E-Wiz is everywhere, than the Ice Wizard.
His usage rate was 1% before the buff. It went up to 2.5% after it. Well, you know, better than nothing, I guess. Anyway, this is the balance change which gave the Ice Wizard the chance to appear and work in the meta again, to the point that it was even considered overpowered yet again. But could you really call the Ice Wizard OP? I don't really know. In this balance change, Night Witch received a big nerf, which basically killed her off. Bats also lost one bat, but Mini P.E.K.K.A got a damage buff, which made him a beast when defending against giants, especially with the Ice Wizard. Ice Wizard and Mini P.E.K.K.A were like the bread and butter of defense. No card combination was as strong as this at that time. X-Bow and Mortar also got buffed with their deploy time reduced by half a second, which revived the OP and original X-Bow and Mortar decks, which, well, you know what? We'll talk about it right now. The Crossbow, the bane of Clash Royale players. Meet the Quick Siege deck, which became meta. It has the Mini P.E.K.K.A and the Ice Wizard, the Crossbow of course, and some quick low elixir cards to cycle that X-Bow in there. The X-Bow would lock onto the Princess Tower while the Ice Wizard slowed down the incoming troops to give the X-Bow a bit more time to deal more damage. If there was an incoming giant push, Ice Wizard and Mini P.E.K.K.A would make short work of that. The first wizard to appear in X-Bow decks was apparently the Electro Wizard, and he was really good in it, but Ice Wizard was just better than him at defense, so he got replaced. X-Bow usage with the Ice Wizard was known as Ice-Bow. Ice Wizard also made an appearance in Hog Cycle decks, but not as decent as the Musketeer. He was also seen in Fast Balloon Cycles, Golem Beatdown, again, P.E.K.K.A Miner, and Miner Control decks. The Ice Wizard just provided a massive defensive benefit. You can't imagine how many outcomes he's changed with his slowdown effect since 2016, because that number, that's gotta be massive. The Ice Wizard wouldn't be at his full glory if we also didn't mention Splashyard. In Splashyard decks, you could build up a push with your cards while defending with the Ice Wizard. Then, when the enemy least expected it, you'd use the graveyard, often with poison, to deal maximum damage. The Ice Wizard would slow down both the enemy troops trying to take out the skeletons and the Princess Tower itself, giving the graveyard more time to rack up damage than it would have without the Ice Wizard's help. This deck was incredibly special because it was featured as the winning deck of the Clash Royale League 2018 and 2019 tournament by players called El Psyop and Surgical Goblin, respectively. As a result, the Ice Wizard was considered insanely strong. Some even thought he was OP, and some even argued that he was better than the Night Witch. Well, duh, she had been nerfed into the ground. His usage rate kept rising steadily. In October, there was a big spike when the X-Bow deck started using Tesla. The Ice Wizard then reached an impressive 10.5% usage rate in the top 100 ladder, which was still pretty remarkable, but not overpowered. It's just kind of a ridiculous thing to say that the Ice Wizard was overpowered. He was just good. Even Supercell knew he was good. People loved him so much that they even gave him a buff in August.
Supercell, they didn't say this outright, but they kind of alluded to the fact when we were kind of discussing the balance changes before they were released, because they provided to us a couple days early so we can share it in videos. And they were like, I kind of got the sense they were like, they felt the Ice Wizard was really strong anyway. And they're like, you know what? People love it. People want it. You know, we'll give him a little buff, but would they think that he was already strong? I really got that sense. So now I think that it's like Ice Wizard meta. That's, you know, the theme of the video. So just kind of sharing behind the scenes a little bit with you guys.
And so the Ice Wizard continued to linger in the meta for months until the Royal Ghost was introduced in December, which effectively shifted the entire game. Ice Wizard, along with the decks he was a part of, took a significant hit. His usage rate plummeted to just 3.5%. While he didn't disappear entirely, it was a major setback. His decks were still being used, but they no longer had the same impact. The start of 2018 was a stagnant period for the Ice Wizard. No noticeable progress, up or down, and by the end of March, his usage rate had dropped further to 3% in top ladder play. However, in April, it spiked to 9%. That's thanks to a few balance changes that allowed him to fit back into the meta. Basically, as we mentioned, Royal Ghost was so powerful in his release that he was pretty much seen in every single deck. In January, his damage got nerfed, and in February, other cards that worked well with the Royal Ghost were changed and nerfed. So as a result, he just kinda withered away. Even in those tough conditions, X-Bow Siege remained a popular deck for many players. But despite that, it was clear the Ice Wizard just couldn't keep up with the new changes. This is kind of something that always happens when a game-changing card is introduced. Nothing out of the ordinary. Ice Wizard was weak to the new metas, and he needed a buff quickly, and that's when Supercell did the unthinkable. Something no one could have imagined. Something that would shock any game company. They actually listened to their community. In October, responding to numerous player requests, they increased the Ice Wizard's slowdown duration by 0.5 seconds, bringing it to a total of 2.5. And while that might not sound like much, it made a significant difference. It gave the Ice Wizard a better chance to remain relevant in the game, and it certainly helped. Not only in October, but he also got another buff in December as well. Clash Royale increased his damage by 10% again, and to make up for that buff, they reduced his health by 11%. 11% may be big, but damn, that 10% damage increase really helped our Ice Wizard to still be viable. He was now able to counter minions and goblins much better than before, and it became a blast against Graveyard. By the end of December, his usage rate was a solid 9%. He managed to still be great and balanced inside the new meta. The decks were basically the same, but better. Splashyard, though, became 10 times better. All it took was adding a single card to this deck: the Tornado. Like the classic Ice Wizard and Mini P.E.K.K.A combo, the Tornado now became the best with the Ice Wizard. The defense basically got 10 times stronger. Tornado would pull the whole enemy push into one spot, and the Ice Wizard slowed all of them down, and the Baby Dragon did the damage. It's safe to say it had a massive value for 6 elixir, especially if your opponent spent twice as much and got his whole push stopped. I think the usage rate for this new deck was like 52 to 54% on Royal API with a very high win rate.
Top win rate decks right now. It is the most popular. It is all over the leaderboards right now. You can see the number 2 player right now, Cal, is using it right here.
Just like Ben said, Tombstone too helped the deck against flying troops like the Lava Hound and Balloon. Ever since Ice Wizard's buffs, he's never seen without the Tornado. Even to this day, almost every Ice Wizard deck has the Tornado, and for good reason. They finally made the Ice Wizard balanced while still being a great defensive card. And this was a great achievement. Sure, there were still some boneheads talking about how he should have been nerfed back down and how he's OP, but don't listen to them. Players loved this card. Nothing else has changed for the following 2 years, no balance changes for 2019, 2020, and his usage rate stayed really consistent, always staying around 8 to 12% usage. In 2019, we saw the classic Ice Wizard Royal Giant deck getting used again. It was known as the safest control deck to be made, and it was dang powerful as well. In 2020, he had a little battle with the new Firecracker card. Players couldn't decide whether the Firecracker was better than the old Ice Wizard, or was the Ice Wizard, still superior. And if you ask me, that argument's kind of dumb. Firecracker's meant to be used offensively and Ice Wizard, defensively. You really can't compare these two together because of the difference in roles. Stat-wise, Firecracker was better because she was annoying as heck and did a lot of damage. On defense, though, she wasn't really as reliable as the Ice Wizard. Ice Wizard, stat-wise, is considered terrible, but the value he brings to the table is still unmatched. However, players still argued about it because, this is an online game and people argue about everything, even though the Ice Wizard was better, of course. Someone even said the Ice Wizard was really annoying. I also want to touch on the new card render the Ice Wizard received in 2020. If you compare the two images, it's like they're two completely different characters who just have the same look. The old card art gives him a more menacing, almost threatening look, while the new render portrays him as a kind, approachable uncle, one who probably enjoys listening to and dancing at an opera, maybe. That would at least explain his dance skills. At least that's my headcanon for it. The contrast between these two versions is striking. They really don't look anything alike. Who knows? Maybe his past grudges disappeared. Maybe he's learned to let it go. Get it? Anyone? Okay, I'll stop with the puns. For 2020, these same decks were circulating inside the game: the Ice Wizard and Golem Beatdown, Ice Wizard RG, Expo, Siege, and Splashyard. There were also meme decks like the Triple Wizard Brothers, which included all 3 of the Wizard Bros. For December, Ice Wizard was sitting at a comfortable 12% usage rate. Everything was going well, and after 2021, the champions changed the entire game. But despite all of this, Ice Wizard was still great. He even managed to reach 15% usage in April. Players started using the Skeleton King as an alternative card to the Graveyard, and it worked pretty well with the Ice Wizard. But I guess this is when Supercell drew the line, and the time finally came to nerf the Ice Wizard. It wasn't like a card-killing change, but still a very important one. In June, they nerfed his HP by 3%. This was to ensure that he finally died to Fireball. Spoiler, Supercell, it didn't. They were a tiny percent off. So 3 days after this change, they nerfed his HP again by 0.1%, now to really have him die to Fireball. And Yeah, he did. The meta wasn't very kind to him either. Mother Witch became meta in May, which countered the Skeleton King's little skellies and completely killed Graveyard, so the Ice Wizard fell off because of that. His usage rates fell off, and for October, he sat at 3%. He continued to die off, but to prevent that, Supercell buffed him once more in December. They allowed the Ice Wizard to deal spawn damage with a slow effect, which gave him a wider variety of uses. For example, if you had skeletons or bats attacking your troops and/or towers, you could just deploy your Ice Wizard right on top of them and they'd be wiped out instantly, assuming your Ice Wizard was, leveled up enough. It was that simple. Tombstone also received a buff. It now spawned 2 skeletons instead of just 1, encouraging more defensive play. And who got nerfed? That's right, the mother flippin' witch. With these balance changes, Supercell effectively brought Splashyard back to life. Ice Wizard's usage rate climbed back up to 7% in December and continued to rise over time. He was finally in the balance once again. But then 2022 came and went with no major changes for our Frosty friend. No balance adjustments, no nothing. The same decks that had been used before continued to dominate, still strong like the good old days. And throughout 2022, Ice Wizard's usage rate remained fairly steady, averaging around 4 to 5% in between October and November. When the Phoenix was hella broken, he still managed to stay relevant because he was able to provide some defensive value. Some fans of the card argued that it needed another buff, especially since the spawn damage was still pretty weak, and it's understandable where they're coming from. While the Ice Wizard wasn't necessarily the most powerful card stat-wise, it excelled at what it did. Players just wanted to see more of what he could offer. After all, he has the potential to be one of the best cards in the game. But he's limited by his current stats. I mean, I get it. We also need to consider the consequences of making the Ice Wizard too strong. If his defensive abilities were ramped up too much, it would make it nearly impossible for opponents to launch any kind of effective attack. And honestly, that would turn the game into a boring tower defense scenario where people just play for stalemate, and nobody wants that. However, things started to get a lot more interesting for our Icy Dancer. In 2023, card evolutions were introduced, which changed the game and the meta once again. Unfortunately, the Ice Wizard started struggling during this period as other cards simply outperformed him in terms of defense. Take the Evo Knight, for example, an absolutely broken card that I'm sure you all remember way too well. He still haunts my nightmares. As a result, the Ice Wizard's usage rate dropped, averaging around 3 to 5%, which was below average. His win rates also fell under 50%, which really hurt both the card and the decks that relied on him. In June, Supercell tried to make the Ice Wizard more viable by increasing his spawn area radius from 2.5 tiles to 3. Unfortunately, this change didn't have that much of an impact. Word spread quickly that the Ice Wizard was now in a bad spot, and while that was somewhat true, especially if your opponent had a fireball, players were still hoping for a more substantial buff, perhaps a spawn damage increase to ensure that he could take out skeletons at any level, but that buff never came. Ultimately, the Ice Wizard's viability was heavily tied to the meta. He could either be strong or weak depending on the state of the game. The only deck where he consistently found success in was Splashyard, but even that struggled against these newer decks. There were some decent decks featuring the Ice Wizard in 2023, but their usage rates were dismal. Some were as low as 1%, making them almost irrelevant. And then there was a new tower troop introduced in January of 2024, the Cannoneer, which changed many interactions and further affected the Ice Wizard's relevance. And then things kind of went quiet. In August of 2024, Ice Wizard received another buff, this time to a stat that Supercell had never touched before: his splash radius. It was increased by 50%, from 1 tile to 1.5. Though a small change, it made a massive difference. Now Ice Wizard could hit more troops than ever before, and guess what? Players started using him again, especially in Splashyard decks. Suddenly, Mortar Bait made a comeback, which was phenomenal. And not only that, but Expo Siege, also known as Icepo, returned as well. The Ice Wizard was officially back in the meta, baby. Apparently, he's even considered OP in Squad Busters at this time. New decks were also created, like the Ram Rider P.E.K.K.A deck. No, not a normal P.E.K.K.A, but an Evo P.E.K.K.A, and also there are other decks which he can still be seen in today, and they have above 50 and even 60% win rate. In October of this year, so 2024, if for whatever reason you're watching this way into the future, he managed to become one of the top cards inside the game, and on October 10th, he literally became the #1 card in the entire game with his rating and win rates, with a whopping 24% usage rate, the highest he's ever been. You see, this half-tile buff turned the card from one of the worst cards into the best. After 8 years from his release, he finally claimed his icy throne to dominate and rule over Clash Royale. Today, with the November stats of 2024, his usage rate is at 16% with a 53% win rate, which is very decent inside of this Evo P.E.K.K.A. and Goblinstein infested meta. And there, you can already see who the Ice Wizard really is. He's not supposed to be used offensively at all, but defensively. He's a defensive support and needs to be used as a defensive support. So you can honestly label all the people who say he's a crap card kinda dumb, because they just don't understand the character's role in their deck. He's not weak. And you know, this kinda got me thinking. P.E.K.K.A. got an evolution, and even Mega Knight, a legendary card, got one as well. So hey, is it possible that the Ice Wizard could get his own evolution? Well, buckle up because it's time for some concept ideas. First evolution idea, how about we take the announcement video concept and make that accurate? You know, one shot and freeze everything in front of him. Nah, I'm just joking, that'd be incredibly overpowered. But for our first real evolution idea, how about we actually make his stats more solid? We could increase his damage so that he could freeze enemy troops just by hitting them harder. That'd make him more viable offensively as well. It's a cool idea, but it might take away from his primary role as a defensive unit. Or, you know what, hey, what if we made it so that after, say, 3 shots, he freezes the enemy, similar to how Ice Spirit works. That'd make him even cooler, but it could also turn him into a bit of an overpowered card. Still, I honestly think there's a way to balance that. What if instead of shooting ice from his hands, he just chucked Ice Spirits? That could make him more powerful and pretty fun to use. Another idea, we could have his spawn damage freeze enemy troops for a few seconds instead of just damaging them. That would be an amazing feature. Heck, it could even change the game in some situations. And for the final concept, how about we make him deal damage over time? Like when the Ice Wizard shoots and freezes an enemy tower or troop, the freeze effect would continue to deal damage even after the Ice Wizard dies. I honestly think this could be the best evolution any card has ever gotten. It would be super impactful and also pretty realistic. I mean, come on, Frostbite's a thing. With all of that said and done, there is your proof that the Ice Wizard is the coolest card in the entire game. Who knows? Enough likes on this video, maybe I'll try to grow Ice Wizard's mustache or something. I don't know, man. That looks so goofy on me. He was the second legendary card ever to be added to the game. So hey, why don't you also watch the first Legendaries history, the Princess? Trust me, you'll enjoy it. I'll see you there.